Ritchie Blackmore is the greatest guitarist of his generation.
I mean, there's no doubt that Ritchie's one of the, quote-unquote gods of rock, guitar.
The whole classical thing in rock, I mean, that was all Ritchie, He's very particular, and I respected that, and he was very disciplined, and he's a great musician, a great guitar player.
But some nights Ritchie Blackmore was so incredibly brilliant, and then some nights he would be incredibly crap, as he knows, for some strange reason of his own doing.
Over the last 35 years, I think every 18 months or so he's made an album and gone out on the road.
He's a one-off. He can be contradictory, and there are definitely two sides to him, and depending on what one you get at any particular time.
I got the best from Richie, I think, because I got him when, Page and Blackmore and Beck. Those three stood alone.
I think he's one of the most copied, mostly very unsuccessfully.
I think he's untouchable.
I'd always been a fan of Richie's. He was always my number one.
You couldn't get close to Richie. I think anybody can, as soon as you get close to Blackmore, you're gone.
Going back to the early years, when I first started playing guitar, I used to go around every place where there was a band playing.
I was in this band, they wanted to go on the road professionally, the Jaywalkers. It was when I was 16.
Richie immediately stood out as something special. When I first saw him, I thought, this guy is something a bit different, because they would do Shadows tunes, but he wouldn't play them like Hank Marvin. He would suddenly break out this amazing solo. I'd always been a fan of Richie's. He was always my number one. Him and Jimmy Page and Jim Sullivan were about the three best. They all came from the same area, and they were the men that showed everybody the way.
From 1962 to about 66, 67, Blackmore was in a whole string of bands, either as a session guy or on the road touring. You worked with people like Heinz, Tom Jones, Screaming Lord Sutch, The Outlaws. He put together a band called Mandrake Root in 1967 and was touring around Europe trying to just earn a living and get experience when the call came to start what was to become Deep Purple. So he was very much a working musician in the same way as Jimmy Page was, but he didn't quite have the kudos and credibility of a Jimmy Page, and I still think that rankles with him to this day. It's a chip in his shoulder. He never got the credit he deserved, even though he was constantly busy and incredibly young when he was doing all of that. He wasn't someone in his mid to late 20s. He was really young when he first started out and first got the opportunity and experience to play with such great talents and to learn his craft.
The whole atmosphere of working with the Deep Purple guys in the beginning was great, because we were all new to one another, and there was a certain air of anticipation that we were going to deliver something a bit special, and I like to think we did. We'd done a tour of Denmark. We got on the road over here. We made an album in 18 hours. They took a single off it, Hush. It went to number 2 or 3 in American charts. And 2 months later, we've been told we're touring America with big stars. Just like that. Unbelievable.
I got a certain little girl, she's on my mind. No doubt about it, she looks so bad. She's the best girl that I've ever had. Sometimes she's gonna make me feel so bad. Na, 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 na.
Purple Mark I have often been decried and overshadowed by the vastly more successful Marks II and III. What Mark I had was a psychedelic edge and a fluidity and a sense of experimentation that possibly was a little missing later on in Deep Purple's career. It was also the start of a wonderful partnership between Ritchie Blackmore on guitar and John Lord on keyboards.
Providing we keep ourselves together and we believe in what we do. We've never been great lyricists, and we don't write sort of fantastic melodies and tunes, you know.
They almost harmonise and work together in a way that twin guitarists have done subsequently, although Blackmore himself has always said, I can never work in a band with more than one guitarist, I'm just too selfish. I couldn't do it with anybody else, but he could do it with a keyboard player. And I think what performed really well for Mark I was that sense that they could do anything. There wasn't anything really that they wouldn't try. They tried folk, they tried classical, they tried blues, they tried acid rock, they tried everything to just try and bring it into their sphere. They were learning their craft. So in a way, Deep Purple Mark I is the most experimental Deep Purple ever became. Had they stayed together, who knows where it might have gone? It probably would have been radically different.
How long was the band together before the first album came out?
About 3 weeks.
Just 3 weeks?
Yeah, we did the first LP in 24 hours.
Is that...
We did, everything was like first or second take. We couldn't afford to take any more than that. But the whole thing was done in 24 hours.
My favourite Mark I track is a cover, River Deep Mountain High, which they did on the second album, Book of Taliesin. It's 10 minutes long, and it's a fantastic rising adventure of heavy rock. It's got everything in it, and it is such a tremendously energetic performance, but it also has a certain sense of control that sometimes was missing from other works that they had. Also worth listening to Mandrake Root and Wring That Neck, two tour de forces when Blackmore really comes into his own for the first time. And it's difficult to listen back now knowing what Blackmore achieved, but if you can imagine being in that situation at the end of the 60s, you really were listening to a guitarist who had some special qualities and talent and wasn't just mimicking people like Jimi Hendrix.
The live act, the Deep Purple live act was totally different from the recording. I mean, the live act was pretty outrageous. Most people couldn't follow our act. I'm not blowing my own trumpet there because we had Ritchie Blackmore, we had John Lord, we had Ian Pace, you know, and these guys could really cut it, and it gelled into a damn good act. Ad-libbing was the great strength of the Mark I lineup, Mandrake Root, things like that.
I was talking to Mick Underwood, who used to play in the Outlaws way back in the early 60s, when Richie was first, you know, in the business. I think Richie was 19, and he said wherever they played, he said people would come from miles around to see Richie. You know, they just were agog at what Richie did. He's not technically as proficient as some I've worked with, say Gary Moore or Randy Rhoads or Michael Schenker, Uli Roth, people like that. He thinks, because he thinks so carefully about what he does, just doesn't fly off his fingers. But in another way, he's got the most amazing guitar sound I think I've ever heard. It's riveting, you know, for any, you know, it makes you go like that. You're on your toes when he starts, you know. Yeah. Not many people can do that. Yeah. It's the mark of a great musician.
Ritchie Blackmore visually looked a bit of a mess, I have to say. In fact, the whole of Deep Purple Mark I seemed to be marketed and presented in a form of dandyish clothing, Regency clothing, if you want. It really didn't fit them. And they always looked ill at ease with everything that was part of them.
When we made the third album, it was starting to look right musically, but it started to fragment sort of personally. I know Richie didn't really want to be involved in writing with John because he didn't want to do classical stuff, and there were kind of little bits of bitchiness creeping in. And I suppose when you've been living in one another's pockets solid for a year or two and recording, or never out of sight hardly, it's bound to happen, you know. It's like being in the army, you get sick of the sight of people. We had a few ups and downs, but we generally rubbed along pretty good.
Well, Nicky wasn't constructive. He didn't have any ideas, and he was an average bass player, so he had to go. Rod just wanted to go to America and live in America, and he's doing very well. He always does very well. Rod's a very nice guy. Well, so Nicky was, but he got very bitter.
We were due to record a song called Hallelujah. Rod Evans had sort of lost interest and was still in America arranging his marriage. He was going to have this big sort of Hollywood wedding, you know. What sources close to the band told me, they weren't interested in Roger Glover, and Gillan was in the frame. Apparently when the roadie went round to pick up me and Gillan, Roger Glover happened to be there, so we came along for the ride.
Roger, poor old Roger, he turned up to the session to do one number we did. He was their bass player. We weren't originally going to take him until Pacey said, he's a good bass player, let's keep him. So I said, okay.
I mean, it made sense from their point of view, because if they get two new guys in, there's two guys controlling the whole show. They've got two guys who are a songwriting team, which solves the problem of writing songs. So you've got just John and Richie calling the shots, because Ian Pace, with all due respect, never said boo to a goose and never got involved in any arguments. He just said, I just want to play my drums, like, include me out. Well, that's it. I mean, I've sort of spoken to them since. I mean, Richie he phoned up once or twice, and we kind of, you know, my attitude was, there's not much point. There's not much point in having a go at these guys, you know. They did what they wanted to do, and you can't kind of turn the clock back. You can't reverse things. So if I bump into any of them, I'm civil to them, you know. They don't mean anything to me, and it's just, you know, that's the way it was.
When Mark II Deep Purple came together, the first thing they did was daft in a way. They get concerto for group and orchestra live. crazy thing to do, but it was a very brave thing to do. And it was at a time when prog rock was starting to rise, and working with orchestras and performing symphonies was regarded as making rock serious and really distancing yourself from the pop chart. It wasn't 3-minute throwaway numbers, these were serious works of art and music. And I think for somebody like Ritchie Blackmore, it gave him the chance almost to get rid of everything that was in there that was leaning that way and say, okay, we've done that now we have to move on. And I think Blackmore, although I don't believe personally he's a natural leader, was the man who took Purple into a direction that was to really make their name. In rock, the first studio album, Mark II, the fourth studio album in the history of the band, was the one that defined them because it had so much pyrotechnic about it. It was a powerhouse album. It was a true heavy rock classic. This is when heavy rock really came into its own. You've got Speed King, which is proto-thrash if you want. Child in Time said everything about how you could be mysterious, epic, dark, and still is to this day. Living Wreck, Fly to the Rat, those sort of songs are really driven rock and roll. So I think what Blackmore did here, with the rest of the band obviously, was to distance themselves from the prog rock, classical, pseudo-intellectual elements and really hit the headbangers. Purple, I think, Mark II, certainly in their formative days, their early days, was definitely a band. I think they believed they wrote it as a band. The chances are that Gillan would have a lyric and Blackmore would react to that. John Lord would have a keyboard idea or Blackmore would have a guitar part, but they'd all react to each other. And they'd build it from there. There was a magic about them. But I think if you listen to In Rock, Gillan is performing at his absolute peak. Blackmore really comes into his own with a style that is very rich in tone, but very dynamic, very thrusting, very powerful. And John Lord actually complements by fitting in to those areas that Blackmore doesn't cover. So in a way, Lord has become a supplemental musician to what Blackmore was doing, and Blackmore emerged very much as the musical leader of the band.
In rock was something that I got fed up with playing with classical orchestras, and I thought, well, this is my turn. I'm the rock kind of thing, you know. So John was into more classical. I said, well, you've done that, I'll do the rock. Whatever turns out the best, we'll carry on with. And I said, if this fails, this record, then I'll play with orchestras the rest of my life.
You don't think it failed?
Pardon?
You don't think it failed? In rock?
Well, hardly.
Rockin' to the east and west, hard-headed woman and a soft-hearted man. Cause the trouble since it all began. Took a little rice, took a little beans, rock and roll down to New Orleans. I'm a speed king, you gotta hear me sing. 'Cause I'm a speed king, see me fly. I'm a speed king, you gotta hear me sing. I'm a speed king, see. I'm a speed king. See me
When Deep Purple came into vogue, for me was probably on the in-rock period, where I just found them to be unique in their style. And I've always liked unique sounding music. Whether I was a fan or not, I found them to be unique. Each individual had their own specific dynamic.
Yeah, it was a good LP. It was very, very, everything was about 20, you know, like, everything was about 1,000 miles an hour. It was good LP, that. Objectively speaking, I think so. Everything on there was good. I don't think there was one track I really hated.
There was no composition on the Purple things. There were basic ideas when you went into the studio. Maybe the magic with Purple in the old days was it was so spontaneous, because when we got it on tape, it was the first time we ever played it. You know, so maybe that was the magic then. But by the same token, we often came across things which we enjoyed playing, but if you took it out of context of an album, you'd say it was dull, you say you wouldn't listen to it. In the context of a 35, 40-minute album, it was right.
To get it onto tape
pain in the fucking arse. That's why I don't like recording too much.
You don't?
No. It's too clinical, again. A lot of people love it because they can edit their music and put it together and make it nice, but when they get on stage, they're lost. Well, my type of way of thinking is the opposite. I love to have that freedom, just going on stage and playing whatever I want to play at the time. I mean, I'll play the numbers which I'm supposed to play, but the in-between parts, when I'm feeling good, I'll be away and play something completely off the wall I've never ever played in my life.
I love working with people who are going to push me because I get a lot of energy. For example, off of Richie. I mean, Richie, when he's playing on stage, tries to blast everyone off the stage.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's a kind of competition. One of the things Richie said to me when I joined Deep Purple, he said, you've got to bear this in mind. He said, I don't mean it badly, he said, but I'm going to try and blow you off stage every night. I said, all right, great. I said, well, in that case, I'm going to try and do the same to you. He said, yeah, great. He said, in that way, we'll have a good band.
Purple could play 6, 7, 8, 10-minute piece of music. And the fact that it was played with a certain amount of skill and talent and a lot of bollocks, you know, made it happen.
On stage we have a lot of intense excitement. It's like adrenaline, kind of nervous presence. Right. People either love it or they get scared of it. You know? It's a bit too, you know.
Right.
That's why we have a lot of people that maybe hate us because we're so demanding. If you don't like the music, you've got to turn it off. What we put down, you just can't talk over our music.
Right.
And we don't want anybody talking over it, so they either say nothing or they leave. And that's why we get, for instance, no radio play in England, because the housewives can't do their dusting when we're playing on the radio. It probably interferes with the Hoover or something.
Ritchie Blackmore became a guitar hero with Deep Purple Mark II, there's no question about it. In rock was the moment really when he started to emerge, with Speed King especially, and also the tremendous power he put into Child in Time, but also disciplined performer. He'd learnt discipline, how to perform without overindulging.
My favourite Purple album was Fireball, and the reason I liked that so much was because I felt it was, from a writing point of view, it was really the beginning of tremendous possibilities of expression. And some of the tracks on that album, I think, are really, really inventive. But I thought that it was a shame that we didn't sort of continue with that sort of expression in our writing, which, as opposed to the sort of slightly formulated approach to our later albums.
Fireball, that was a bit of a disaster because it was like thrown together in a studio. We had no time, managerial pressure. You've got to play here, there, and you've got to make an LP. And then you're back to Australia, you're back to here. I got kind of bitter about that. I thought, you know, if you want an LP, you've got to give us time.
Right.
And they wouldn't, so I got a little bit bitter there, and I just I just threw ideas to the rest of the group that I thought up on the spur of the moment. I had nothing in my head.
Ritchie Blackmore is renowned for being unpredictable, the man in black, moody, volatile if you will, and I think he's earned that reputation over the years, absolutely, because the man has done some amazing things, from California Jam, Deep Purple, first big show with David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes in California, hundreds of thousands of people there, it's being filmed, and Blackmore actually said to the cameraman, one of the cameramen, don't get in my face. If you do, I'm going to smash your camera up. And the guy got in his face, so Blackmore just hit the camera, which you can see on film, he just smashes the camera up. That's the sort of thing he can do. And he actually said, I warned you, so therefore I told you I'd do it, and I did. He also has a habit of basically saying on stage, especially to vocalists, especially in Rainbow, this is the area you're allowed to be in. If you step out of that area, I'm going to smack you over the head with my guitar. And he has done. So he's very much a control freak in that way, and very much unpredictable. He loves practical jokes as well, loves winding people up as part of his persona, as it were. And I'm sure it all goes down to the fact he's not very good at dealing with people in the right way.
See, I have my own dressing room because I like to tune up, and I like my solitude before I go on stage. I tend not to get too involved in people because, to be quite honest, I find a lot of people are boring. I find myself boring most of the time. I don't like to be caught up. I always like to be the opposite. I always was at school. That's why I don't smoke. I used to find everybody at school smoking, you know. Oh, it's a big deal, man. Smoke, you know, rebellious image. Like, I thought, well, because of that, I won't smoke, and I never have, you know. Maybe if they hadn't smoked, I would have done, you know. Yeah. Mind you, I was probably doing other things which were just as bad, if not worse, you know. I'm still very moody, shy, and very honest, which a lot of people can't take, you know. Honest? Yeah. And which is the hardest thing in this business is to is sincerity. Once you can fake that, you're laughing, you know.
Ritchie Blackmore has sort of developed a persona which I believe he's quite famous for now, where he just doesn't seem to like people. Now, I always seem to get on great with him. We'd go out to bars together, just the two of us, we'd rub along together. I always thought we got on great, but he would say strange things to me, like when you picked me up in the car, he said, you're always smiling and it annoys me. And I thought, that's a strange thing to say. I said, has it ever occurred to you that I'm smiling because I'm pleased to see you, Richie? And I thought, that's an odd thing to say.
He's bawled people out, vocalists out in public before. He's had an ongoing public feud with Ian Gillan now for 3 decades. He's had an ongoing public feud with David Coverdale for nearly as long. And he doesn't seem to do anything to try and smooth things over. As far as he's concerned, that's the way he is, and that's the way people have to accept him.
We're not brilliant songwriters, you know. I write most of the stuff, but I think some of it stinks, you know. We only get away with it because we're so good musically, you know. In fact, I wish some people would come forward and write songs for us, because we need it.
Well, he cultivates an image, you know, and a part of that is the bad boy. So nothing prepares you when you meet him for the charm and how quietly spoken he is and how direct he can be. But he is difficult to work with. Anybody who's any good is difficult to work with. He has a way of, you know, cutting through the self-indulgence, cutting through the dross, and getting to the meat of the matter, whether it's music or your travel arrangements or the way you present yourself. You know, he wants it right, and he normally gets it. You know, he knows how to run a band. It's not an easy thing to do.
Machine Head, they gave us, because of the Fireball result, they said, all right, we'll give you 2 months off. Consequently, it was a great LP, I thought. And we had ideas, Ian Gillan, himself and Roger. it began to become a trio writing then.
Right.
John started stepping back, and Ian just gives percussive ideas. And so it was a trio by Machine Head.
Nobody gonna beat my car, but gonna rape them to the ground. And nobody gonna pick it out, they're gonna break the spinning sound. Oh, it's a killer machine.
You know, I got an iPod recently, so I put a lot of the old records on, you know, and I was listening to Machine Head the other night, and it's just, I mean, some of the solos on there, like, maybe you don't hear them in 10 years, you could still hum them, and, you know, they're so melodic and, like, almost perfect. I mean, it's great.
I think Ritchie Blackmore is a man who doesn't suffer fools gladly. And as a guitarist, as a musician, has always taken his craft very seriously. Whatever else he might do in life, there certainly leans towards practical jokes. He takes his musicianship very seriously. I think he hates the fact that there are people out there who are overrated, who indulge themselves and they really have no right.
I don't just play what I want to play, I play, well, people want to hear this, you know, which is what it's about. I don't like to play for myself, I've done that for too many years. Now it's a case of what's going to be good for people that are listening, you know. Right. It's only fair. If you want people to buy your records, then you should play to them. You shouldn't like play to yourself. That's what it's about. Success is playing to the people, not playing to yourself.
Thank you. That was the title of your album. It's called Burn.
Can you talk about your fairy tale discovery?
Yeah, with the accent on fairy.
I've always wanted to get on, you know. And I auditioned Deep Purple last year in August. No, it was...
Presumably you're nearer normality than they are. I mean, they've been living in this fantasy for so many years. Presumably the contrast between...
I've always had the fantasy there, you know.
Sorry?
I've always wanted, I've known what it was about, you know. I just wanted to, instead of standing outside the door, I wanted to get in. You know.
And you're happy now you're there?
I'm very happy, yeah. Right.
David Coverdale brought a very bluesy approach, which Ian Gillan doesn't have. A throatier, darker, deeper, soulful voice. And I don't use those words, I mean, I'm using the words soul and funky in a way I feel comfortable with. What's the point of having two clones of Gillan and Glover coming in and recreating Machine Head?
People are saying the woman is damned. Mr. Bird with the wave of the hand.
You see a progression in your album career?
It's sort of gone like that, you know, to us. We've gone up and then taken one step back, then 3 steps, then 1 back, you know, in terms of the album.
I'd always worked with good musicians, Steve, don't get me wrong, but this was like another level. It was so in tune with what I wanted, you know, and fortunately I was with what they wanted, you know. So it's worked out really very well. But it was the first time I'd gotten off my arse to do something, you know, and play it off.
You know, as far as Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, I think Burn stands up with a classic album like Machine Head, simply because it is a bold step forward.
Burn, I feel the balance between the Coverdale Hughes funky element, shall we say, and a more traditional Lord Blackmore classical heavy rock element worked brilliantly.
We don't have many bad nights. In fact, since we've started, we've got on 3 fingers we've had maybe 3 bad nights. I mean, we do have a bad night. We don't fight. We just walk off, and we don't speak to each other. And the next day we go on stage. It's like that.
We don't ever argue intensely. When we criticise each other, it's always polite criticism.
Yeah, you're
It's never...
shit, man.
Blackmore is one of the best, you know, like, he's as far as I'm concerned, he's a total electric musician. Him and Beck are on the same level as far as I'm concerned. Well, I think Richie's higher because he's more consistent, you know, as much as I love Beck. But I've heard Richie play some of the finest blues, you know, that's made the hairs under my neck stand up. And he can also go to the extreme.
When Richie's in a band, there's going to be tension and friction, and that's the way it's going to be. And as soon as comfortable things set in, people would move and the tension would shift and people would have to leave or be fired, you know. And Byrne was the typical example of 5 guys living together, enjoying the parody of playing these great songs live, at least for 6 months, you know, while it was new.
I've always had a theory about Deep Purple Mark III, and that is Blackmore realised when David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes joined to replace Ian Gillan and Roger Glover, respectively, on vocals and bass, or in Glenn's case, bass and vocals, that he was bringing into the band elements that he wasn't comfortable with. These were people who veered a little bit towards funk and soul, which Blackmore didn't feel to be part of what Deep Purple were or should be.
I like black people that can sing rock and roll, but I don't like black music funk, you know. It bores me to tears.
So you definitely don't want to see the band go that way?
Oh, no. This is as far as it goes now. It's the end of that. Back to rock and roll, next LP.
Isn't that hard because Glenn and David are so much into black music?
No, only Glenn's into black music.
It's very strange, but he's a guy that used the words Glenn Hughes in his shoeshine music and funky, but if you people listen to Stormbringer, please listen. Ritchie Blackmore is damn funky, whether he likes it or not. He played wonderfully on the album. I think at this point he'd had enough of playing. He'd lost his foothold, I think, as far as we were going in a more band direction, as far as Coverdale, Lord Pace and Hughes were. We were going in a new direction, you know, we were growing. Every artist grows.
He misunderstands well, I think he misunderstands when we talk about funky and things, because he's such a funky player, you know. Like his licks came up for the that song "You Can't Do It Right with the One You Love." What's that if it isn't funk, you know? But he thinks funk is the you know, I think his idea is like cool, you know, don't dig it, ding.
James Brown.
But then again, you know, he's thinking of it in the extreme sense. I'm thinking of it in the subtle sense, you know. Like one of the funkiest bands I've ever heard is Free, and that's one of Richie's favourite bands. Right. But he doesn't regard it as funky. He calls that heavy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to me, it's funky as well as heavy, you know.
When it came to Stormbringer, their second album, John Lord told me that when they were in the studio, he realised Blackmore was starting to write stuff for a different project and had lost interest in Deep Purple, to the extent that when it came to a guitar solo, Blackmore had always been so protective of his own area, just to say, tell you what, John, you take this solo, just do it in keyboards. I won't bother with it. It's John that actually said at the time, I realised then Blackmore really didn't have much interest in what we were doing and was going to take a different direction. And Blackmore himself has openly said, I wasn't into the funk and soul at all, really didn't feel comfortable with it, so therefore he decided, time to go. I have to quit. Now, at the time, he wasn't prepared to quit the band so much as take a side project.
It started with Black Sheep of the Family, the song. I put it to the Purple, let's do the song. They went, no, why should we? I'm like, but it's such a great song. And they went, no, we didn't write it. I'm like, what's that got to do with anything? And I'm like, because you won't get any writing credits, you don't do this song? Yep. That was basically the bottom line. So I said, well, I'm going to do it with somebody else. And Ronnie was just around at the time.
So they came up with that, came up with the B-side, and it suddenly mushroomed into an album. And at the time, Blackmore said that he felt it was going to be a side project. I'll put it out, and then I'll go back to Deep Purple. But the further into the project he got, the more he realised how much he was enjoying working on this type of music, and how divorced he'd become from Deep Purple, and it was time to move on. Therefore, Rainbow became his focus, and Deep Purple were left in the past.
We finished the LP and I was really pleased with that. Came back to the LP. And then we had a tour with Deep Purple, and after about the third gig I realised that I'd been spoilt. During making this LP, I'd enjoyed it so much that going back with Purple was becoming a hardship, I really thought. Because everybody was egotistical, including myself. And it was really getting very hard to put together an LP. Nobody really had that many ideas, and it was what ideas were going around I didn't personally like. So most of the band were going towards funk and shoeshine music, if you like, you know. Anyway, about halfway through the tour, I decided to tell the band, I said, look, I don't want to go in the studio. And you know, they took it well. And they just had a holiday and got another guitarist, to cut a long story short.
I feel with Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the debut album from the band, came out in 1975. That's where Ritchie Blackmore wanted to go. He felt comfortable with it. In a way, it was taking what he'd done with In Rock and Machine Head into another area. Of course, it was far more Renaissance era inspired, if you will. 16th century Greensleeves, for instance, very much actually is a track that fits into what you'd expect from the title. A little bit folky, a little bit classical, very heavy, very hardly and driven. Black Sheep of the Family was on there, the track that realistically started his move away from Deep Purple, because the rest of the Purple guys didn't want to do that cover. Catch the Rainbow, very haunting. There's a very great feel of melodic heavy rock on the Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow album. Even the cover has a certain medieval element with the guitar in the shape of a castle, and I think that's where Blackmore wanted to go. He wanted to produce that form of music. It was a new direction for him, and to be honest, it's a direction he's never really strayed from since.
I'm just playing the music I want to play, the music I believe in, whereas with Purple towards the end I wasn't believing in the music. And as soon as you start disbelieving, the audience is going to stop coming to see it. Yeah. And I wasn't going to just see it through because another day, another dollar business, you know. I don't get off on all the side effects that go with being successful, particularly. Obviously, I don't think one wants to be without money, but when it came to it was either music or money. So I took the music.
I respected Richie. I think he's a brilliant guitar player, a good friend, a hell of a great guy to me. You know, he's weird and all that. You know, that's his image, isn't it?
I think Ronnie suited the band the most. This is how I sing, and at balls, you know, big ones.
We put the LP down in a month. It's come out. I'm being modest and saying it's kind of brilliant. It's come out very well.
For me, his best work with Rainbow is definitely with Ronnie James Dio. And we are talking about 3 studio albums. Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, the classic Rainbow Rising, which is the great record, and also Long Live Rock and Roll. 3 different lineups. Ronnie James Dio is the only guy who appeared in all 3 albums, but those albums really represent what Blackmore could do. I'm always pleased to either hear it or see it in print that was the classic lineup of Rainbow, you know, that I was in, and that makes me feel good, you know.
We became huge afterward. You know, after we broke up, then those first albums became huge. And then, you know, as Rainbow went along, it became a different band, it became a pop band. But to this day, the second album especially is always listed on everybody's list as one of their favorites, Rainbow Rising. My favorite was the first one always. Yeah. But hey, we'll take it where you can get it.
It was a well-oiled professional machine, run well. Everybody was disciplined and professional and, you know, good attitude. I got on great with Cozy. We were, you know, pals. Ronnie was a lovely bloke. As soon as I was in the band, you know, I was kind of like a young lad. So he sort of took me under his wing, and you know, and I felt comfortable in it, you know. And I got on fine with Richie too. Never had a problem. I'd had people say to me, "Oh, be careful of Richie. You know, he chews people up and spits them out, and you may not last long, and you might be out of a gig and all that sort of thing." Oh, isn't Blackmore weird? Isn't he difficult? Isn't he hard to deal with? Isn't he an arsehole? Isn't he this? Isn't he that? I didn't have a problem. I got on and did the job, didn't rock the boat. You know, I wasn't a yes man, but I just, you know, did the job professionally. I was reliable, and I didn't let anybody down. I think Richie's can be demanding, but that's not a bad thing. You know, he's very disciplined, and he expects everyone else to be disciplined, and that's not a bad thing. You know, I actually enjoyed it.
I think with Ritchie Blackmore, like most great musicians, like most musicians who've achieved anything, there's always a fine balance between lack of confidence and overconfidence, ego, if you will. I'm sure there are moments when Blackmore doubts himself and doesn't quite know where he really wants to go and whether what he's doing is worthwhile. But of course that's complemented by other times when his ego just gets way out of control and the man himself is capable of walking off stage at Wembley Arena without doing an encore because he says the crowd don't deserve it. Now that's a fascinating thing to say, but also I think there is a point in the fact that what Blackmore says is encores should be about a rapport. It has to be something earned by the band and by the audience. And when neither really achieves that, what's the point in doing it? Because you're just deluding yourselves. It becomes just a matter of rote and not something that's part of a spontaneous effect. And I think that's what makes Blackmore tick. He's such a complex character. I have no doubts he has crises of confidence on occasion, but hides it well because he's also become a bit reclusive. And also on top of that, I think he's also very bad at dealing with people. He's not a natural band leader. Over the years, you look at the way he's treated people, in Rainbow especially, he's not somebody who seems to nurture and guide. He offers the stick, but never actually sort of has the carrot as well dangling.
I don't consider myself that good to front a band, and I don't want to front a band. It's a case of I'll always do my flash business on stage, which I like doing, but I don't want to be the... I just don't like, for some reason, to be known as leader of a band. I like to be a pusher, obviously, of the band, but I don't like... because nobody can be a leader of a band if they're really truthful.
We never really carried on. We never progressed. As far as I was concerned, the band was regressing and not progressing. We had a lot of tools there, but you know, the band became live, especially, you know, rather dissatisfying, and it was always a, you know, solo for Richie in the beginning, solo in the middle, solo in the end, every song. And after a while, I mean, you know, even the laziest of people probably are going to want to do some more. And I'm not lazy, and I want to sing all the time, not all the time. But, you know, I mean, I saw no sense in it.
And for me personally, Rainbow ceased to be the real Rainbow when, you know, the pop tunes started happening and the hit singles in the charts. And I mean, you can't knock the success of it, and they were good quality pop songs, but it lost that sort of, you know, we are a heavy rock band, serious about the music, you know. For me, that was a little disappointing to see that happening.
When Richie got Joe Lynn Turner into the band and changed it round, and it became more keyboard based. It was built, there was much less guitar on the albums, much less of the riffing. It was Richie's attempt to capture the American market, and he did it very successfully over the 3 years that him and Joe worked together.
Yeah, you know, it's when I first got in the band, everybody says, well, you got big shoes to fill, you know, and I arrogantly said, well, I'm going to make my own footprints. I don't fill shoes. And I think I did. I think I created another style. I think, of course, a more commercial style, which Richie wanted to do. I mean, this wasn't ill-conceived. This was targeted. You know, we wanted to become a more commercial band at that point. I had no problem singing the Graham songs or the Dio songs. You know, although history seems to prove that they won't sing my songs or what have you, which is whether they're capable or not, I'm not sure, because I respect both of them as great singers and friends, actually. So, no, I love singing, you know, all the Dio stuff and the down-to-earth stuff that Graham had done, you know, because a song is a song is a song, you know, and what you do is you put yourself into it.
Stay by my side. You know I'm doing what you want me to do. Don't take away the freedom inside me. I'm still in love with you. I surrender, I surrender. Giving up the roll up and down. I remember. Can't you feel enough?
I thought a lot of the songs were good, but I didn't really go for the pop sensibility. When I go and see Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, I want to see him playing guitar. When I buy an album, I want to hear him rocking out. That's just me. But that's what inspired me, that's what drove me, and that's what I enjoy.
This was a whole new experience for me, so I had to learn to front the band as well, because I was a guitarist singer in my old band, Fandango. So when I took the guitar off, my hands got really big. You know, it's an old expression, and you really don't know what to do. So you have to learn a whole new mic stand technique and whatnot, and it was pretty awkward for a while. Thankfully, I had Richie kind of giving me pointers, you know, and don't do this, do this.
Joe's a great guy. I like Joe, but Joe is, you know what Joe's like. Joe's very effeminate. Of course, we took him on stage in Europe.
He got crucified really good.
And I took him backstage and I pulled him by the throat and I went, "You've got to stop that pansying." I said, "Joe," and I pulled him backstage. I said, "You've got to stop that." I said, "They're going to kill us."
We all came down to Montreux by the lake to the shoreline. Jamaica wrecked with a mobile. Frank Zappa in the movies, we're at the best place around. So stupid with a flare gun, you know it burned the place to the ground. Smoke on the road, fire in the sky. Smoke on the water.
Whether or not it's come to be up as opposed to the Purple, that's another thing. Purple reached a level that perhaps Rainbow never did in terms of commercial success and wide-ranging impact. And Blackmore's guitar influence was certainly greater during his Deep Purple years than it was during his Rainbow years. However, I suspect that someone like Yngwie Malmsteen, for instance, who has based his entire career on Blackmore, was probably influenced more by his Rainbow period than by his Purple period. And to this day, I think both are equal, well, should be equal in people's minds anyway.
It always struck me that he was just what they call an old trooper. I mean, his record, over the last 35 years, I think every 18 months or so, he's made an album and gone out on the road. That's what he does, come hell or high water. He just gets the product out and he goes out with a band. It's a considerable achievement. Along the way, he's made some amazing music.
When Richie and I sat down together for the very first time, he said, "What kind of album do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to do a cross between Rainbow Rising and Deep Purple's Burn." And he said, "That's a good answer." We started off going in a heavy direction, which was the original intent of what Rainbow was back at the beginning. But then he kind of backed off and said, "Well, but we need to have songs that girls will relate to." He definitely wanted to have some lighter, more melodic tunes in there, just in case one of them took off and became the next Street of Dreams, or the next I Surrender, or whatever. That didn't happen. Times were a changing. Grunge was a huge was coming out, and we were fighting very much against that. And as far as doing songs for girls, no girls ever came to a show. It was all look out and it was just to see a guy. It's just hello, and I'd sing a love song. It was kind of weird.
There was a lot of things to enjoy. Sometimes I'd stand on the stage and I'd hear Ronnie singing, this great voice coming out of this little guy, and Cozy, beating the crap out of the drums, and I was, locking in with him, and I'd look across the stage to Richie, and I'd be entertained just watching him, entertained by my own band sort of thing, But it was very enjoyable, and having come from Widowmaker, which wasn't so disciplined, and all of a sudden into a very professional unit that was, really on the money, on the ball. That was very enjoyable.
It makes it look so effortless, which is sometimes I used to watch him, and sometimes he would make it look really complicated and awkward and difficult. He would be throwing his hands over here when he was playing a deceptively simple piece, and then when he was playing a really complicated piece, he made it look really easy. But he's very contradictory in everything that he does. He wants to have songs on the jukebox because that's where he thinks. That's what he told me, where then that you've arrived if you go in and someone's playing your songs on the jukebox. But at the same time, he rejects being recognised, and he rejects the rock and roll or the celebrity that comes with success. He rejects that. So he's a guy of many contrasts and opposites, which makes him a fascinating character. The other great thing about him is that he has a stage presence that it's an act of stillness. He's very still, and then he'll do something, and the whole audience of maybe between 3,000 or 10,000 people will just go bananas just because he's just done this one move that he'll maybe do.
There's no doubt that Ritchie's one of the, quote-unquote gods of rock, guitar. I mean, there are many others, but I think he started a whole school of influential other guitarists, for example, Yngwie Malmsteen and so on and so forth.
Blackmore stood alone. Ritchie Blackmore, I mean, Eddie Van Halen still talks of Blackmore as being a major influence to him. So, you know, I want to thank him for pushing me and actually robbing me to make me a better singer, bass player. The old drama of don't come across my side of the stage because I'll hit you with my guitar. I want to thank him for that because it showed truth, arrogance, and somewhat of a genius to do that. So I only have great things to say about him. Although bizarre as he is, and he's probably laughing when if he sees this, he's a true one-of-a-kind guy.
I like the whole improvisational thing. I mean, that's sort of the way I was schooled growing up. The bands I like Cream, and they always had that free kind of, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end, let's go for it somewhere in the center, you know, and I love that kind of playing. I still do. It was sort of like controlled chaos. I mean, we'd be doing extended solos and stuff, and it'd usually be either a phrase or, you know, a look or a drum fill to get you into the next part, you know, depending on the song.
Oh yeah, and if you look at the set list, I think it's only about 8 or 9 songs or something, and it goes for almost 2 hours because there were lots of little like medley things in there and improvisation bits that were almost kind of rehearsed and disciplined improvisations. It wasn't just, you know, let loose, do what you like, but it made the songs quite lengthy.
You know, you just have to keep your eye on Richie, and when he'd do one of those, you'd know his next part was coming, you know. It was pretty cool.
So do you think that you're one of the most misunderstood people in the music piece?
Not really. I think they understand me because I don't have much patience for people, and I'm a very moody person. And it's like, misunderstood? No, not really, because I want them to understand that I'm a moody person and that life is not a bowl of cherries. You know, music is, you're always fighting music to get to the bottom of something. You can't, you know, go through life shaking people's hands and going, everything's wonderful. If you're a newborn Christian, maybe. I just, you know, for me, it's, life is a struggle. There's icebergs everywhere. You've got to dodge them.
I never had a problem with them. We always got on well until that one day when we didn't, and that was it. It was as quick as that. It was just done.
I think he, I mean, he's not paying me anymore, so I could say what I want, and I think he's just, you know, he's still one of the most influential guitar players ever.
In my opinion, Ritchie Blackmore is the greatest guitarist of his generation. Technically now there are technically better guitar players in the same way that Ritchie was technically better than B.B. King or any of these guys. There's guys who can play more notes, there's guys who can play faster arpeggios, there's guys who can do finger tapping. But for feel and for guitar sound and for memorable riffs and guitar solos and just general groove, I think he's untouchable. I think he's untouchable. He's always been my favourite guitar player. He remains this day to my favourite guitar player. Even now, when he's playing acoustic music with Candy and Blackmore's Night, there are still elements in there when I listen to that, and you can just hear the magic coming out of his fingers.
Ritchie Blackmore these days is totally immersed in Blackmore's Night with his personal partner and musical partner Candy's Night and vocals, who remarkably has been with him musically for a longer stretch than any other vocalist. Yes, Ian Gillan worked with him on and off through various stretches, but in one long stretch, no vocalist has worked as long with Ritchie Blackmore as Candice Night, which is remarkable. The problem, of course, is that everyone wants to see Blackmore rock out again, do Purple, do Rainbow, and all he wants to do is dress up as a hey nonny nonny gnome and play Renaissance type music. However, of its type, it's very good. The problem is that because it's Ritchie Blackmore, Guitar God, Ritchie Blackmore, Deep Purple, Rainbow, everybody wants to hear him play Stargazer, play Long Live Rock and Roll, play Smoke on the Water, Child in Time, and he doesn't. He wants to produce this type of performance. Personally, if that's what you want to do, fine. If there's such a great legacy of rock, if you don't want to do it anymore, why should anyone force you? Blackmore feels, I did Deep Purple and Rainbow, what do I want to go back and do it again for? I want to actually spread myself into different areas, and I'm really enjoying this type of music. This is what I really love listening to. This is what I love performing. Why shouldn't I? Yes, an awful lot of people in the media, an awful lot of fans don't like it because they want to see Blackmore do Rainbow or do Deep Purple. But being the contrary person he is, the more people try and pressurize him into doing it, the more he's going to say, no, I'm not. Simple as that. Maybe we should just leave him alone. And there are little hints on the last couple of albums just starting to suggest he's getting back the mojo to rock. Fingers crossed it carries on, because I'd love to see him do it one last time.